Welcome to all of you, and thank you for joining us from your corner of the world, wherever that is. For those of you I haven't met yet, my name is Kate Daleiden, and I oversee our perennial program at Kenyon. Today, we're going to hear from Eve Kausch, our outreach librarian, and two of their student archive assistants, Zoey and Kate. But first, a word about our perennial program, of which all of you are a part. The perennial program is for the group of alumni that have already celebrated their 50th reunion. This program was born out of a COVID revelation. During those couple of years where reunion was off, we started hearing from alumni of this era that they wanted to return to campus while they were healthy and available, not only during their class's 5-year reunion cycle. So that's where the name Perennial came from. Now you can come back every year. We also thought that was better than anything akin to Golden Oldies or something like that, but that's neither here nor there. The logo for the program is an asphodel, which is, of course, a nod to our cherished Kokosing farewell, the line that says, "In meadows sweet with asphodel." So for the last 4 years, we've had a perennial dinner and coffee hour at reunion, and now we're expanding opportunities for this group to engage with virtual programming like this event. And then next up, we're going to be hosting midday perennial events in cities throughout the country. So while these events are open to all alumni, they are designed to be geared towards your interests. So if you have any suggestions for things you'd like to hear from the college, send them my way. And now, without further ado, I'm delighted to join all of you in hearing from Eve, Zoey, and Kate about our archives. I think you'll agree that this is an amazing resource on campus, and it's so perfectly Kenyon in the variety of materials that we preserve and the breadth of students who interact with these materials each year. As they're presenting, if you think of a question, please feel free to drop it in the chat, and we will have a Q&A session at the end. And now, Eve, the floor is yours. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Hi, everyone. It's lovely to meet you all virtually. My name is Eve Kausch. I am one of the 3 librarians/archivists who work in special collections and archives at Kenyon, and I'm joined by 2 of our student workers, Kate and Zoey, who are both senior history majors. I'm going to do a very brief little presentation about what we are, what we do, and then Kate and Zoey will talk a little bit about how they engage with our materials and the archives in both in their work here and in classes that they've taken at Kenyon. Make sure my cursor's in the right spot. Okay, so to start off with, I wanted to talk about what is the difference between special collections and archives. So we are technically 2 buckets in that name. There's special collections and there's the archives. So the special collections are materials that are too rare, valuable, or fragile to be in our main circulating collection, so you can't check them out. You have to come to our reading room or to a class session with a librarian in order to view and handle these materials. Importantly, the main distinction between special collections and the archives is that special collections are materials that are not necessarily related to the college's history, but they are often related to our curriculum, so we get to use them in classes a lot. I have some examples on this slide. The first one is a medieval manuscript leaf. So it falls under the category of things that you may typically think of when you think of a special collections. Old things that are really rare. This collection of medieval manuscript leaves are our oldest objects in our collection. They go back to around the 12th century. And they're a really great teaching tool for history classes and art history and book history. A lot of people at the college engage with them in their classes. But we also have newer materials. So the second picture on this slide is a Holocaust ephemera collection that was donated by Mike Bullmash, who's class of 1966. I'll talk more about that a little bit later. And that also gets used very heavily in classes. And then the third image on this slide is what's called an artist book. So this is the one category that, people, when they think special collections, they often think old things. But we do have newer items. So the picture of this book on the slide is from 2013, so it's very recent, but it was one of only 150 copies made, so that makes it pretty rare. They're often handmade, which makes them more valuable and more fragile, so we don't want it getting damaged and being checked out and thrown in somebody's backpack and taken to the dining hall. So we have a pretty extensive collection of artist books. We used to have a faculty member who used them in her classes a lot. She has since retired, so we no longer acquire them like we used to, but we do still use them in classes, studio art and English classes, and a lot of different opportunities to look at things like that. And all of our special collections materials are searchable on the library catalog, which can be found at library.kenyon.edu. I'm going to mention a couple places on the internet throughout my slides. I'm not going to go into too much detail except at the end when I'll talk about Digital Kenyon. But if you have any questions about how to find what we have, I'll share our email at the end. And you can also drop questions in the chat as we're going. So I talked about special collections, the college archives, the other half of special collections and archives. The archives are the materials that are related to Kenyon's history. So the scope of the archives includes materials that were created by students, faculty, and staff during their time here at Kenyon. So we collect programs, pamphlets, newspapers, photographs, flyers, and posters, and we always tell students when we have them in for classes that we collect these materials from Kenyon today as well. We want there to be a record of what Kenyon students are doing today, so that 50 years from now, people can look back and say what was happening at Kenyon in 2026. And especially as we're in this digital age, we get fewer and fewer paper donations. So we try to impress that on the students that we really want their stuff. We have a new site as of this past fall for searching the archives. So you may be able to find some materials from the archives in the library catalog that I mentioned earlier, but a really great place to go if you want to know what we have in the archives is this site, archives.kenyon.edu. It's searchable, but I will say it's not like Google. So if you make a typo or you spell something wrong, it's not necessarily going to pull up that we have something if it's not spelled exactly how it's spelled in the archives. But it's a great resource for finding out, hey, do we have any material from your time here at Kenyon? Maybe we do. The next thing I wanted to talk about was a little bit about what we do in archives and special collections. So I wanted to talk about the difference between preservation and conservation. So we do preservation. We do not have the skills, the staff, the equipment to do conservation. So the difference, preservation is keeping materials as they currently are. We don't want them to have any positive or negative change, so nothing added or taken away from them if at all possible. So we have our own HVAC system here, separate from the rest of the library building. So we can keep our humidity at 50% and our temperature at 70 degrees Fahrenheit. That's the temperature and humidity that paper tends to like. We rehouse all materials into acid-free folders and boxes. We sleeve photographs. These are things that we do to make sure that things stay stable, they stay not damaged. Especially really acidic things like newspapers can disintegrate and they can transfer their acid to other materials. So we want to make sure that things are in as much acid-free paper as possible and separated if they are potentially going to spread their yuckiness to other things. We remove staples, paper clips, and other metal fastenings that may rust. I have seen some really gross rusty staples in the archives, so that's always satisfying to get rid of those. And then the last thing that we do for preservation is no food or drink near our materials in our reading room or classroom. Conservation, on the other hand, what we don't do is the actual repairing of damaged materials. So this can be flattening crumpled pages, repairing and reinforcing ripped paper, rebinding old books. This requires more staff and equipment than we have at Kenyon. You typically need a separate master's degree than what we as librarians have to do this work. You need very expensive equipment and knowledge and chemistry know-how that we do not have. So we typically apply for grants from the State Library of Ohio to get some of our books and materials conserved if and when that's necessary. So with all that preamble, I wanted to go quickly through some highlights in our collection before turning it over to Kate and Zoey, our students, so that they can talk about how they fit into all of this. So the first highlight from our collection comes from the college archives because it's related to the history of Kenyon. These are the Bexley architectural plans, and these were found by John Hattendorf, who I think I saw in this Zoom. Class of 1964 during his time here as a student under some paint cans in a shed. And so this is a fantastic story that we actually share with students frequently because we often give a presentation on the history of Kenyon libraries to kind of help students understand what were academic libraries and Kenyon's library like from the 19th century to now, and how did we get to be in a special collections and archives classroom. And so my understanding is that John was very helpful in kind of creating the first time that a lot of these, what would become the college archives, these archival materials about Kenyon or Kenyoniana, started coming together in the 1960s to have a place of honor there. And we have used these architectural plans in classes a couple times. We had an art history class on architecture a couple of years ago that we got these out, and they looked at them, and we find them really beautiful. The next thing I wanted to highlight is from our special collection. So this is not related to the history of the college, but this is one of our most used items from special collections. It's the Nuremberg Chronicle. This was printed in 1493 in Nuremberg, Germany. It is a history of the world, but from a German perspective, and it was written and printed in 1492, 1493. So it was before they knew of Columbus's discovery, quote unquote, of the Americas. So it, is a history of the world, but it's missing a chunk of the world. So it's a really interesting piece of print history. It was printed just like 40 years after the invention of the Western printing press by Gutenberg in 1450. So it gets used a lot in our book history classes and art history classes that want to look at woodcuts. And the awesome thing about this book is that it was a gift from the class of 1955. So we are always so appreciative when we have really awesome teaching tools and books like this that alumni or students, in their time or after, came together to donate. And I included two pictures on this slide because this book was conserved using money from the State Library of Ohio and the Institute of Museum and Library Services in 2017. So the picture on the left is what it looked like before, and the picture on the right is what it looked like after. The conservator worked her magic, flattened out the front page, and created a really nice clamshell box for the book so that it can be supported when we're using it in classes and maintain it's in pretty good shape, but we want to keep it that way, so the box helps us do that. These are just some pictures from the Nuremberg Chronicle because it has really gorgeous woodcut illustrations. And so one other thing that we often talk about when we use this in classes is that it was a very Christian history of the world. So on the left is a photo from the start of the book where it starts with the creation of the world, and then in the center is Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. And then it goes through the history of the world. It has all these different woodcuts of different cities in Europe and different popes and history and things like that. And then there's some blank pages for you as the owner of this beautiful book to continue writing the history of the world. And then after the blank pages, we get to the third image on this slide, which is the rapture. So it ends with the end of the world. Starts with the creation and beginning of the world and ends with the end of the world. So it's a very interesting text. And then the last thing I wanted to talk about is our Bolmash Family Holocaust collection. So this is a collection, as I mentioned earlier, that was donated by Michael D. Bolmash, class of 1966. It is pretty much entirely digitized online on Digital Kenyon, which I will do a very brief tutorial at the end of my slides. It's one of our most downloaded digital collection. and it gets accessed by users across the world. And it is used in classes a lot, especially history and religious studies. So these are just some of the items that we have in the collection. We have a lot of photographs, we have a lot of postcards and documents. We have a couple of these metal signs like the one you see in the center. We have a lot of armbands and other examples of Jewish the Star of David patches that Jewish people were forced to wear. And I should also mention that today happens to be Holocaust Remembrance Day. So it's an important collection that we have. And I think is very valuable for students to engage with these primary source objects from this time period, especially as fewer and fewer survivors from the Holocaust are still alive. All right, so really quickly, I wanted to show you if you are curious about what we may have available online. We do have some of our collection digitized on Digital Kenyon. So I'm going to click on that. Kate, can you just give me a thumbs up if you're seeing Digital Kenyon right now? Thank you. So Digital Kenyon is where we put digital files from special collections and the archives that we want to stay accessible. So it's digital.kenyon.edu, and you'll see that the college archives and special collections are 2 of the 6 modules. So quickly, I'll click on special collections, and I'm going to click on the first link is the Bolmash Family Holocaust Collection. And this is where pretty much the entire Bolmash collection is digitized. Mike has done some really phenomenal and in-depth work with this collection. So there's a lot of text and there are a lot of different little collections that he's made. You can also scroll all the way to the bottom and you'll see these preview boxes of some of the different items. And if you click on them, it'll take you to the page of the item. With everything on Digital Kenyon, when you're at a page that looks like this, if you see this blue download button, if you click on that, it will open up a PDF, and that will be how you can view the entire document if you're struggling to see the entire document. So I'm going to go back to the Digital Kenyon homepage and just very quickly show you on the college archives side. We have a lot of materials from the college archives digitized. We are continuing to digitize items from the college archives. So we recently finished and are working on posting scans of the News Scope, which was a newsletter published, I believe, 3 times a week from 1970 until 2009. So you may have interacted with that while you were a student. And we are moving on. Our next digitizing project will be working on a different newsletter called the Fortnightly that was primarily for staff and faculty from the 1990s to 2015, I want to say. But that's all to come. And what we have now is we've got some information on college presidents. We have letters from Philander Chase and Charles McIlvaine digitized, and a lot of publications. So this is where those publications I mentioned will go when we get to digitizing them, which I should say it's a years-long process. It takes a lot of work and a lot of time and wonderfully dedicated students to digitize things. So I'm going to click on the Kenyon College course catalogs and just show you that this is a really great tool when people reach out to us and ask us, oh, my great-grandfather went to Kenyon, or do you know if so-and-so may have gone to Kenyon? The course catalogs used to list every single student by name up through the 1970s, I believe. And so it can be a really great place to confirm whether or not someone went here. And pretty much all of our collections on Digital Kenyon are searchable. So I'm going to see if this will work. If I want to find what year did Rutherford B. Hayes graduate from Kenyon, if I search Hayes, it's going to take its time. There we go. So I can see that I have 70 results, which is kind of a lot. So I'm going to instead put in Rutherford B. Hayes, or just Rutherford Hayes. We'll see if that works. And that narrowed it down to 27 results, which is a lot easier to go through. And now I do actually know when he graduated, so I'm looking at this first result, which is from 1904, and I know that that's after he graduated. But this next one is the catalog from 1838 to 1839, and I know that he graduated in 1842. So if I click on this, I get back to this page, just like the one from Bullmash that I mentioned. I'm going to click on this blue download button, which will open the document in another tab. And then I'm looking at our digitized course catalog. I can scroll down to where it lists the undergraduates, and I can see, let's see. Here he is listed under the freshman class, Rutherford B. Hayes from Delaware. And sometimes it also gives information, this 13 WD, I believe that is the dorm that he lived in. I was looking at this earlier and I'm not sure what the D means, but I imagine it's West Delano, maybe. But anyway, sometimes these can be really helpful for even figuring out where they may have lived during their time here. But the acronyms, as you can imagine, changed a lot over the years, so sometimes we have to do a little bit of conjecture. But that's my very quick digital Kenyon demo. I know that may have been hard to follow, but on the screen now is our email, archives@kenyon.edu, so you can always email us questions if you're curious about what we have. Or how to access something. We are happy to help. Yeah, I think I'm gonna stop sharing and I will turn it over to Kate and Zoey, who can talk a little bit about what they do in their work in the archives and anything that they've interacted with in class that they want to share as well.
Hi, everyone. I'm Zoey. I am a senior history major from Jackson, Mississippi, and I've been working in the archives for about a year as an archives associate.
And I'm Kate Tucker. I'm from Marblehead, Massachusetts. I'm also a senior history major. And I'm the student manager here at the archives. I've been working here for about 3 years now.
Yeah, so we have a lot of responsibilities working in the archives. We are responsible for helping preserve records. So right now, I work today from 9 to 12, and I went through person files. So not every Kenyon graduate, but a lot of Kenyon graduates and professors or people who work here or people who came for commencement speakers, anyone associated with Kenyon College who left a record that has nothing that's independent from an organization or a department that already has a file, has their own person file. And I was pretty much going through each folder and making sure everything that was in there needs to be in there. And if there's staples, taking it out, putting things on cross-reference sheets, updating it on inventories. So for digitizing purposes. And so when people reach out asking about maybe a Kenyon grad and wanting to do research, we have a file and we're able to tell them what's in there. So that's one thing that we do.
Yeah, we also do a lot of work with rehousing. Eve was talking about this earlier. I recently had a project where we found a lot of old boxes in the basement of Lent's house for the Rural Life Center. And there are about, I'd say, 25 boxes of uncatalogued and unpreserved archival material from the 90s and early 2000s. And I spent a few months taking everything from those boxes, putting them in acid-free folders, putting everything in sleeves, and making sure that there was a catalog of everything that we had online so that it could be used by others.
Yeah. And we also do a lot of scanning. So we scan things like news scopes, which you've mentioned earlier, fortnightly, so it can be digitized. Also like honors theses, so that will be digitized on Digital Kenyon. Also, if someone reaches out for a request of wanting something from, I don't know, from the Kenyon chamber singers, a photo, we can scan that. We'll scan it and then so we can email it back to them. So we also do work with the community. Yeah, that's our role as like what we do here, but we also get to interact with the archives. Like since working here, I've learned so much more about the college's history, far beyond just like different buildings that, you know, that had fires. But I've learned a lot about like organizations that I'm part of and like the history of the different spaces I'm in. One way I used the archives for like just my independent research was I was putting on a show, the Rocky Horror production, and we hadn't had in a few years. So I went through the archives of like the collegians and New Scopes and different student publications, and I wrote about how the Kenyon's history with Rocky Horror and how that's changed within the past 40 or so years, and then able to bring stuff from our production that we did this year to the archives for that to be preserved for future Kenyon students.
Yeah, I've had similar experiences outside of the archives. I play on the Ultimate Frisbee team, and I think my favorite discovery that I made in the archives was a series of images of students playing an early form of Ultimate Frisbee that was kind of like touch football with a cake tin. And it was really cool to see because the Ultimate Frisbee team has been at Kenyon for 50 years. In 1975, or just about then, it was created. But these images were from, I believe, 65, and that means that Kenyon was one of the first ever colleges to have like any form of Ultimate Frisbee, which means that we get to brag at tournaments, which is always a, a good time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the archives are a small like Kenyon's a small world like world. One of the first days that I was getting trained, the first day I was getting trained on how to interact and preserve person files. My best friend's father, who's a Kenyon alumni, I saw his folder, and he was a theater major here, and so we had so many like of the programs within shows that he was a part of, and here in the archives we only keep two copies of programs or like of records, because we want to keep space for new donations, and we don't want to hoard 50 copies of something. So even Elizabeth is one of our other supervisors, let me keep like 10 of the programs I would have just thrown recycled, and I was able to give to him on like parents weekend. That meant a lot to him because he got to go through the list and see people who he hasn't seen in like 20 or so years. So that's another cool way of like using the archives to interact with like the Kenyon community. um but yeah, we've also not only do we work here and get to interact with the archives for just every day, but we also come here as students, so we'll talk about our experience as a student in the archives.
Yeah, both of us are history majors. Obviously, we interact with the archives a lot as students. And I think that working here and just spending so much time here has let me cultivate and expand on my love for history and also my love for any of like my research skills. I'm writing an honors thesis right now for my history capstone, and I've been able to use our pretty extensive Yates collection for a lot of my first chapter, which was very exciting. But I think that every history class and art history class that I've taken here has spent at least one session in the archives, and it just expands my learning and my perspectives on the subjects that we are learning about in a way that I think I'm very, very grateful for.
Yeah, a lot of our peers have never been to archives before, so getting to come here for a class is really an exciting opportunity for them. And as history majors, like the basis of my capstones also relied on like my summer in the archives, and so just working here has like opened up a world for research for me. But also, yeah, I've come here for almost all my history classes, but I took a creative writing class last semester, and we also came to the archives. And the art books that Eve mentioned in their introduction actually inspired one of my friends for her final creative writing collection. So expanding students' minds of what creative writing can be, and we using the art books as inspirations, and just also just like we come here and like for classes, and we see like old photos of Kenyon and old books, and it's just always a really engaging class experience. Yeah, there's been language classes who come here, religious studies classes. Working here, there's always some sort of class coming in during our shift. And yeah, also by working in the archives for the past year, it led me to last summer work in an archives at home, which I wouldn't have gotten that job if I didn't have this experience. And that helped me formulate and inspire my research paper, my senior paper. And now it's the archives and possibly library science, something I want to pursue after I graduate from my time here. So working here has definitely given me great experience. So yeah, that's all we have.
Sorry, I couldn't get off mute. Thank you all so much. It's always a joy to hear from our students, and I'm always humbled at how intelligent and brilliant they are. If you all have questions for either Eve or Zoey and Kate, feel free to drop them in the chat. While you're doing that, Eve, Thomas Mason did jump in the chat and mention the papers of Philander Chase that were edited by Andrew Richmond, and Elizabeth, who also works in special collections and archives, replied that he came for a visit last month. Can you tell us more about both of those things?
Yes, so the Philander Chase letters, as Elizabeth mentioned and put the link in the chat, they are scanned and transcribed and posted on Digital Kenyon. They are a really great resource, and Andrew Richmond was a student here who did a lot of work on that when he worked here and has since gone on to work in the archives museum world. And his visit last month was not exactly related to the Philander Chase letters, but and Elizabeth, I know you're in the Zoom. If I'm getting anything wrong, please either you can put it in the chat or unmute if you are brave enough. But he is putting together an exhibit for the America 250 anniversary this year, and wanted to borrow some items from our collection for that exhibit on America 250 in Ohio. I think it's 250 objects representing the history of Ohio for America 250. And so he came by within the last month to pick up those objects. And it's always really wonderful to reconnect with students who worked here on projects like the Philander Chase letters.
Very cool. Thank you. Eve, this one's also for you. Can you describe the interplay between you and faculty members in using these materials? Are you or someone else on your team teaching the students about the materials in special collections or archives, or are the faculty members leading those discussions?
This is a really good question. The answer is that it's a bit of both. So it depends on the class, the faculty member, and what they want and what their expertise level is versus what our expertise level is. So some classes, the professor knows exactly what they want. They say, I want to look at these materials and I'm going to do the lecture and I'm going to talk about that. And sometimes that's great because I can't read Greek, for example. And so when a classics professor wants to bring their class in to look at some of the texts we have in Greek and Latin, they know more about those texts than I do. But for other classes, like I actually have a class later this evening. It's an evening seminar. So from 7 to 8 p.m., I'll be working with an Arabic class. It's a special topics class on the Arabic Renaissance. And we have these really big descriptions of Egypt, which is from when Napoleon invaded Egypt around the turn of the 19th century. They're really gorgeous books and also get used in classes a lot. And the professor is a newer, younger faculty, so often it's the faculty who have been here for a really long time, who've done classes with us semester after semester, who are like, yeah, I got this. But when it's a new class or a younger professor, that is when oftentimes I or Elizabeth, our director, will be the one who does primary teaching. So we do start every class with a little intro to special collections and archives. It's a little bit similar to what I gave you all, talking about the difference between special collections and archives, and then also talking about the guidelines and rules for being in our space, no food or drink, etc. And then either after that, I turn the class over to the professor, or I will often lead the students in an activity. Sometimes it's a worksheet, sometimes it's something else a little more hands-on, or just rotating around through tables to be able to look at materials. I I think one of my favorite things about getting to do these classes is that, like Kate and Zoey said, we're like the fun field trip. So students are often really energized and excited to, get moving, get out of their normal classroom and come down to us and see things and put their hands on old things is really exciting and different.
This one is for Zoe and Kate. I think you both mentioned that you're seniors, so you might be considering your options for what's next. Zoe, I think you might have mentioned considering a future in library science, perhaps involving archival work. Was that always the plan, or did your experience working here influence that path?
Yeah, that was not my plan before attending co college and definitely before working in the archives. I've worked in the library since my freshman year at the circulation desk. So I joke with my bosses that like I'm always in the library because archives are also here. But no, it wasn't until junior year when I got this job and before I had no prior experience, but working here in the archives, I've just really enjoyed it and having like Elizabeth and Eve. They've been very helpful with like thinking about my future today. Elizabeth, while I was working, I was able to ask her questions about post grad and what she did, and she gave me advice. And also just like telling me about different options, what it means to actually go into library sciences, what it means to go into archival work, the different paths, the difference between getting your master's in library sciences versus focusing in archives or special collections and the different opportunities I can do there, and the difference between working in museums versus libraries and how those intersect. So definitely working in the library, especially in this archives, especially, they've been a great resource for me and something, and it made, archival work on my radar when I wasn't expecting work before college. I never thought I'd work in the archives, but now it's something that I want to possibly pursue. What about you, Kate?
Yeah, I feel like the skills that we learn here are not skills that I think I would have gained otherwise. I think that I have a far deeper knowledge of just like research and like the use of different archives and different collections. And I think that working here has definitely helped me think through all of my options in life. And I've realized that I really do love the research aspect of it. I was very lucky to get a grant over the summer to go to Ireland and visit a bunch of archives over there. And I think over time working here, I did realize that I wanted to get my PhD in history. And so that's the hope, but I don't think I would have gotten there without having worked in a space like this.
John just dropped in the chat. Some European libraries have been trying to reconstruct medieval manuscripts that have only partially survived in their collections. I wonder if anything has matched to the Kenyon collection of illuminated pages.
Yes, our the majority of our manuscript leaves are part of a collection, a portfolio put together by Otto Eggy. So he was a man from Cleveland who did not he was not a librarian, or he didn't directly work in rare books, but he was an aficionado, a lover of rare books and of medieval manuscripts. And he wanted people to be able to learn about and use and touch medieval manuscripts, and so he had, I think, 50 books that he cut up and separated the leaves. Um, yes, and created these portfolios that are scattered across primarily the Midwest and colleges in the United States. Um, we talk about this fact a lot in classes that it really sucks that he cut these books up because that means that there are fewer complete manuscript books in the world. He claimed that they were damaged, that they were all damaged in some way, but I think it's, it's no one's really sure how truthful that claim was. But because they are all pretty well documented in these portfolios, there is a project out of Denison University actually to digitally reunite the books. And so that has been happening. I think not every single every single leaf is accounted for. But it's a really great endeavor because it is a little shocking to imagine someone cutting up a book, especially one that old. But the flip side of it that we always tell students is that medieval manuscripts are very, very expensive, and we do not have, a small school like Kenyon does not have the funds for purchasing a complete medieval manuscript. And so, as unfortunate as it is that Otto Eggy sliced up all those books, it also made it possible for us to have those as a teaching tool for students. So I don't think that students would be able to engage with those materials if they weren't repackaged in a more affordable format.
Eve, this is reminding me, John's question is reminding me, I just recently, I think last week, read a story that the comms department put together about, it was about the Holocaust collection, the Bolmash collection, and it made reference to a New York Times article. The New York Times article was referencing a photograph, a copy of a photograph that we have in the collection. I think it said 250,000 people access the materials. Is that right? Do you have any idea how the Times found out we had that? Or is there any story there? Or like, I just thought that that was shocking. 250,000 people accessing the Kenyon archive. I thought was amazing.
Yes, I will clarify digitally accessing the archive. We did not have 250,000 people coming through our reading room, thankfully. But yes, there was a link to Digital Kenyon included in the second paragraph of a New York Times article in late November. They did not reach out to, we didn't have any request or reach out to us prior to that being published. The object in question is under public domain and is listed with a educational use permitted Creative Commons type license. So they my assumption is that the article was about a professor at another institution who was doing this research and using AI to be able to do facial recognition and figure out who the Nazi soldier in that image was. And so my assumption is that being a faculty member at another institution, they may have found our link somehow through some connection that way, or perhaps because ours was, listed as being in public domain, that made it easier for the New York Times to say this is an image that we can publish without asking anyone. So sorry, it's not more of an exciting story.
Still great though. I mean, I just thought that that was remarkable when I saw that. That's no small number of people. Okay, you've mentioned a couple of instances where AI has been helpful to thinking about different archival materials. We're hosting an AI summit on campus this week, and everyone in higher education is talking about AI. My personal undergraduate degree is in history as well, and I keep thinking about sort of primary source materials and AI and how the interplay between the two of them. And you mentioned earlier that like we print so much less, right? And I keep thinking like, do today's students like are they going to even understand with AI what a primary source is or how it like how do we differentiate between that and something online that may be more opinion based or something like that? I wonder how if you could just comment how you talk about that in the archives or how you're thinking about AI and either a positive or concerns you may have. Sorry, that's kind of a big question, but
Yeah, I think there's a lot here. We do talk about one of the professional organizations that I'm in puts out a list of primary source literacy guidelines, and so I spent a lot of time with those this summer thinking about trying to improve my teaching and um, my skills in getting students to understand the difference between primary and secondary sources. And I think something that a lot of educators across higher education and beyond are grappling with is that students are coming to college with either different or less knowledge in some of these information literacy areas than they have in the past. That's a whole other conversation that I could spend a lot of time on. But yeah, I think that AI is one potential reason for some of that difference or lack of knowledge. Um, I definitely personally have some concerns about AI, but I will say one on more positive thing we were talking about last week with some of our other colleagues in the library is that there are people who are working on trying to create AI to be able to read handwriting, especially script, like cursive handwriting, which, you know, it's there's no substitute for the real thing and doing the work yourself. And that is one thing that I do see in classes a lot is that some students had never learned cursive, and so they're not able to read script. I did learn cursive in grade school, but even I sometimes, if the handwriting's really bad, it's hard to read really old. I mean, sometimes you can look at an 18th century letter and it's like immaculate, and you're like, I can make that out perfectly. And other times you look at something from the late 19th century and they have horrible handwriting, and it's like, it feels impossible. But it's really a learning curve. So I do think it is important for students to be able to learn that skill, but for digital access and digitizing and transcribing, having an AI tool that could be able to accurately assess and transcribe someone's handwriting with human checking built in, of course, would make the process of transcribing a lot quicker. So could be really beneficial in that regard.
Eve. And then I think we'll end with just one more question for Zoey and Kate. I wonder if you could talk to us a little bit, whether it's at the archives or not, but you've been here for in your senior year now. Can you tell us what your favorite part of being a Kenyon student has been, whether it's about academics or personal or whatever?
I can go first. I used to work in admissions, so I have this kind of figured out. I think for me, it's definitely the people here. I think what makes Kenyon special is that no one ends up here on accident. You have to make the intentional decision and drive here. You fly in or drive in, like you can't, you don't, no one just ends up in Gambier. And so I think that attracts very specific and interesting and passionate people. And I've been able to meet friends, but then also like professors and faculty who are very forward thinking. And I don't know, I feel like I've engaged in so many different conversations that, growing up in Mississippi, it's different, but also I think, but with that, I think what I really enjoy about Kenyon the most is the people who um really form and contribute to the community. If everyone decided they didn't want to do anything, then nothing would happen because especially students really kind of determine what the culture is, and I really appreciate that. I think I coming since coming to Kenyon, I feel like I'm involved in a million things, and I'm always busy. So I always have something to do, which is nice because otherwise, if I didn't have somewhere to be, it's good to be active. It's good to get around, and it's nice walking around and being able to like wave to most people because you're involved in some sort of way with them through a class or through an organization or just through the Kenyon spider web. But I definitely think um the friends, the classmates, the professors, and the faculty who live in Gambier, Mount Vernon, I think is what makes this place really special and stand out from everything else in the world.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And I think on top of that, the fact that everybody here is all in.
Mhm.
Like everything that you do, even if you've never done it before, you're gonna try your best and you're just gonna figure it out. I feel like I did theater in high school and thought I was gonna do music, and then came here and took a history class, and everybody was so excited about what we were learning, and everybody was so engaged in a way that I'd never really experienced before. And I wanted that so badly. So then I kind of got roped into being all in. And the theater, like, I had never really played a sport before, and now I'm on a nationally ranked D3 frisbee team. And I just think that there are experiences here that I would have never had anywhere else because of the passion and the energy that the people who choose to come here and choose to be here bring. And just how infectious that energy and that like joy is, I think is a really beautiful part of our community. And I think that's something that a lot of people come across when they're here.
That's really funny because used to only do sports in high school. I did soccer and no performance at all. I was very shy. And then I came to Kenyon and I am on rugby, but I've been in like a lot of different performances in like theater shows and like we did a switch. That's yeah. So Kenyon's a place where you can blossom and grow into a young adult who tries a lot of new things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. I wish I could bottle you guys up and take you on the road with me, but there's no way I could top that. So I will just say thank you so much to Eve, Zoey, and Kate for your thoughtful and engaging presentations, for making time to do this. I'm going to drop a link in the chat to Digital Kenyon. So if anyone on screen wants to check out some of the materials that were discussed, that's how you can find them. If you have questions about anything you heard today, or you have suggestions for future events that you'd like to recommend, that's my email in the chat as well, daleiden1@kenyon.edu. Remember, reunion registration for all perennials opens up on February 2nd. That's next Monday. So we'd love to see you all in Gambier this May, and can start registering as soon as next week. I can't believe it. Thank you all again for being here and have a great day.